These adult meerkats babysit their nieces and nephews. They literally stick their necks out in search of predators. What they do is dangerous. They could attract unwelcome attention themselves. So why take the risk? Well, it makes sense. These little nieces and nephews share a quarter of their genes with their aunties. So looking after two of them, in biological terms, is as good as having their own child. These family values in animals always stick to a golden rule. The more genes family members share, the more they'll do for each other. But the big question is, are we humans the same? Meet the Gavin family of Essex, England. They're about to take part in an unusual experiment to test their instincts.
My name's Elf, and I'm father to Kim and Lisa.
I'm Lisa, and Philip and Becky are my children.
I'm Becky and Kim's my aunt.
My name's Kim, I'm mum to Helena, Matthew and Heather, auntie to Philip and Rebecca, and sister to Lisa.
Just like the animals, the closer the Gavins are on the family tree, the more genes they share. And if they obey our golden rule, the more they should do for each other. Here's the test. We're challenging them to hold their breath underwater for as long as they can. The longer they do it, the more money they will earn for one of their relatives.
I've got Philip.
And who's Philip?
He's my nephew.
According to biology's golden rule, they should hold their breath longer for people who are most closely related, sharing the highest proportion of their genes. First off, Alf holds his breath for his granddaughter Becky, with whom he shares a quarter of his genes. He manages just 16 seconds. When he holds his breath for his two daughters, with whom he shares half his genes, he does much better. 22 seconds for Lisa, and 21 for Kim. Now it's Heather's turn. First she holds her breath for her auntie Lisa, who shares a quarter of her genes. The result, 51 seconds. Good work. Next is her more distant relative, cousin Becky, with only an eighth of her genes. As predicted, a lower 47 seconds. But watch what happens when Heather takes the plunge for her very close relative, brother Matt. A whopping 72 seconds. It makes sense. They share half their genes. Scientists have repeated this experiment on a number of families. Results show that when it comes to being generous, there really is a natural pecking order. People put themselves out more to help people who are more closely related. So without thinking about it, the Gavins obey this golden rule of biology. But some families are far from harmonious. Bitter rivalry between relatives would suggest that the golden rule doesn't always apply. Take the English kings during the War of the Roses.
This is the Tower of London, home to gruesome scenes of torture and execution through the centuries. Between 1300 to 1600, the facilities here were put to particularly good use by various members of the royal family as they fought each other for the throne.
In those days, the quickest way to seize power was to bump off your nearest and dearest. Scientists decided to study this bloody period to find out what becomes of the golden rule. If families are keen to help their closest gene-sharing relatives, are they also keen to avoid harming them and wiping out a proportion of their own genes? At first sight, it would appear not. Take the case of the brutal murder of the Duke of Clarence, who met a sticky end in 1478.
Rumour has it that Clarence was drowned in a butt of Malmsey wine here at the Tower. What's certain is that the man behind his death was none other than his very own brother, Edward IV. Now, killing your own brother is a biologically dangerous thing to do when you consider that he shares half your genes. That's half your own genetic value down the drain. But it turns out that Edward IV was a particularly bloodthirsty king. He also got rid of 6 of his cousins. But these were distant cousins, and their genetic value to Edward was small. So when the scientists totaled up the value of all the genes he'd destroyed, they found that Edward was not as reckless as he seems. What's truly surprising is it still doesn't quite make one whole Edward. There's still a little left. Edward never spilled quite enough blood to wipe out 100% of his own genetic value. And in fact, throughout this bloody period of English royal history, nor did any other monarch. It's almost as if they kept the formula in their heads by instinct, even to secure the hotly contested throne for themselves and their children. It seems there were precise limits to the bloodthirstiness of these cutthroat royals. However ruthless the monarch, their instincts held their ambition in check. It's easy to understand why we might instinctively protect members of our family. But there are times when human beings are capable of the most heroic actions for their friends. Is it possible that we've evolved instincts that encourage us to do this? These men have a bond that makes them feel like brothers. It was forged under the most extreme circumstances after the heroic actions of this man, Al Raskin.
We bestow the medal knowing that America would not have survived were it not for people like him, who generation after generation have always renewed the extraordinary gift of freedom.
Medic Al Raskin and his friend Neil Haffey were just teenagers when they went to Vietnam. But what happened there, neither would ever forget. It was the 16th of March 1966, and the young soldiers were close to enemy lines in a reconnaissance platoon.
It was a very tense time. We saw a lot of troop movement in the area. We uncovered a big cache of weapons. I'm talking tons of weapons. It was as though you were blowing up a balloon just waiting for it to pop.
They spotted an enemy machine gun nest up ahead, and Neil Haffey opened fire.
As soon as I got one round into it, all hell broke loose.
Machine gun fire was going off, small arms were going off, hand grenades were being thrown at each other.
The squad was pinned down. Neil watched powerless as a close friend was killed just a few feet away.
I just lost it. I just stood up, starting to run over to where he was. At that point, this enemy soldier, as close as you are to me, shot me point blank.
Seeing Neil badly wounded, Al Raskin jumped up and rushed towards him, ignoring a hail of bullets.
And as I'm trying to get towards Haffey, hand grenades are thrown at him.
One landed maybe 3 or 4 feet away from me. And I thought it was my turn to go. I thought definitely I was going to be dead within the next couple of seconds. And I remember just turning my head because I didn't want to see death coming.
With his friend in mortal danger, Al Raskin made a split-second life-and-death decision.
You're looking at a person that you know, and you have no other choice than to take care of that person. Whether your life is going to be taken away, You don't know.
I was expecting the grenade to go off any second. I was just closing my eyes and waiting for it, and all of a sudden this heavy weight just jumped right on top of me, and it was Doc.
I had no choice but to cover him with my body.
Al used his own body to shield his friend. Taking the full force of the grenade blast himself, Al was so badly wounded that the chaplain gave him his last rites.
I think there are things that are done out of instinct, things you can't come back and plan for. It's not a condition where you have the privilege to come back and think about it. It's something you just do.
I believe Doc was going on instinct and adrenaline when he was doing all this. He wasn't thinking. I think even a medic of Doc's caliber, if he would have thought it out, he wouldn't have done it.
30 years later, Al Rascombe was given the Medal of Honor.
I'm very thankful for what Al did. You know, I've had a good life so far. I've had a good career. I have a beautiful family. Been places I never would have been able to go dead. So I can't thank him enough. You know, I try, but I can't.
Al risked his own life to save his friend. He believes he did it on instinct. But why would instincts to protect people who are not related to us have evolved? Scientists have found clues that help us understand why we all have instincts to help our friends. The evidence lies half a world away, with a particularly bloodthirsty animal.
Here, in the jungles of Costa Rica, there lives a remarkable species of mammal which is closer to us than you might like to think. Life is very tough for these animals indeed, but they found a method of coping which sets them apart. They help each other, and they do this by swapping